Families and their communities, Socioemotional and Spiritual Development of Early Childhood by Miranda Wells. Socio-emotional development in early childhood. Socio-emotional development in early childhood encompasses many different elements of the child and can affect the individual's physical and cognitive development as well. Early childhood development is one of the most critical stages of development in the human being's life. In the first 5 years of life, your child's brain develops more and faster than at any other time in their life. Your child's early experiences stimulate their brain, creating millions of connections. Socio-emotional development incorporates a child's understanding of themselves, others, gender, and gender identity in order to build their sense of self. It further delves into the individual's ability to understand and express and regulate their emotions. Spiritual development in early childhood. Spiritual development is crucial in forming the child's moral reasoning, feelings, and behaviors. These will not only be with that individual for their early childhood career, but for the rest of their lives as adolescents and adults. During this time, a child develops a conscience and begins to test the boundaries of right and wrong, experiencing a spectrum of emotions in the process. And I have a little video for you guys to watch as well that I thought was really interesting.
The latest brain research that's out there, this new understanding that children are learning from birth is really exciting. And I think it has sort of the capacity to change the way we interact with particularly infants and toddlers, but also preschoolers.
What we've seen is a very significant shift from the 80s with sort of our focus on IQ and cognitive skills to a really impressive focus and a groundswell around social emotional development.
Social emotional development is the learning of how to be human, really, from the very first day of life.
Does your kid share with other kids? Can they resolve conflicts with other kids? How do they feel about themselves? How do they express themselves?
We have a lot of tests in our schools. You know what they show? They show the amount of input that every child has at home.
It really boils down to self-management, self-awareness, and self-control. But it's not just about the self, it's also about empathizing with other people and relationships and perspective taking.
What we want for our kids is to have a sense of purpose and to be able to communicate with others and to feel confident in their own skin.
Can they manage their negative emotions enough so that they can get along well with other children in the classroom?
What you're doing is building their level of trust and security, and that's going to be their foundation of happiness and confidence for the rest of their lives.
Building a sense of self. Erik Erikson's 8 developmental stages. So 2 of Erik Erikson's 8 developmental stages are relevant when looking at the social emotional development in early childhood. As toddlers, autonomy is built and the elements of shame and doubt are learnt. When moving into the realm of preschoolers and the initiative stage, children develop a sense of guilt for their actions. These stages are highly important for a child's socio-emotional development as it allows them to identify right from wrong and improve their ability to interact with the world around them. Building a sense of self and self-understanding. In early childhood, children begin to understand themselves as human beings with rights, responsibilities, and characteristics. The idea of self understanding begins to set the foundations for discovering their identity. Children can show that they have a basic understanding of themselves by verbally describing or drawing a representation of themselves. Often, a child at the early stages of self understanding can use material characteristic differences to distinguish themselves from their peers and people around them. This can include age, hair colour, eye colour, and height. As children move into the later stages of early childhood, they should be able to use more advanced descriptors of emotion in order to identify themselves as an individual, such as I'm very brave when there is thunder, but Jessica is always a scaredy cat. Building a sense of self and understanding others. While moving through the socio-emotional development stage of early childhood, children also begin to understand other individuals in their world as people like themselves. Children between the ages of 3 to 5 are able to begin to think about the underlying motives an individual may have for their actions or words and build a skeptical view in certain situations. Studies were completed in the late 20th century relating to children who grew up in orphanage-style homes and were integrated into family life once adopted during adolescence. These studies demonstrated that children did develop highly affectionate bonds with their adoptive parents, but, quote, were indiscriminately friendly with strangers, had higher rates of anxiety, social, emotional, and peer problems, displayed antisocial behavior at school, and had fewer close relationships than a working class parent reared sample. It is clear that the early stages of a child's life and the development of these key emotional identities are imperative to leading what society deems a normal life of emotional well-being. Children are much more perceptive than once thought to be. With this information coming to light, children's socially sensitive nature needs to be discussed, and the multitude of emotional states one can experience needs to be taught to children by way of example and role modelling, so they are better able to identify situations and respond in the best possible way to their own feelings and others around them. This increased understanding of emotional states and why one may feel these emotions, and in turn act in a certain way, has an impact on children's ability to understand others around them. So, understanding their gender and gender identity is also quite important, and it's something that we don't really think about as something to tick off the boxes the children have accomplished. So, gender and gender identity is one that children often discover early in the stages of early childhood. Children at the age of 3 and even as young as 2 can identify what physical gender they are and what physical gender their peers are using visual characteristics and with the help of teachers and adults around them assisting with gender identification. This process, however, is not just the identification of male and female, but understanding the knowledge and acceptance of these concepts. With this comes the exploration of stereotypical gender roles in play, whereby children can identify their culture's gender roles and begin to act these out in dramatic play. Children may also choose to experiment with these gender roles as a part of understanding the opposite sex. Children will often go through a process during this time of acquiring traditional masculine or feminine roles, also known as gender typing. So, emotional development in the stages of early childhood, expressing emotion. In the world of early childhood, children are in a constant state of emotions. They are continually learning about this giant world around them and reacting to new experiences in many different ways, whether they be positive or negative. Basic reaction based emotions like happiness, sadness, fear, and anger are all ones that are often experienced daily for a child between the ages of 3 to 5. It is not until a child can identify themselves as a human being, however, that a new realm of emotions can emerge. These are called self-conscious emotions, which include those such as pride, shame, embarrassment, guilt, and empathy. These are higher order emotions that require much more emotional intelligence and maturity to feel and express, even though we express them every day just like we do happiness and sadness. Educators and parents need to assist children in learning about how these emotions affect a young child and equip children with the tools to handle these conflicting and often difficult to deal with emotions. In the research conducted by scientists in the late 20th century in an orphanage setting, it was noted that those children exposed to social and emotional neglect displayed something called psychosocial dwarfism. This is a physical deficit in growth directly relating to the psychological neglect the children experienced. This demonstrates how imperative to the holistic development of a child the social emotional development is. Continuing on with the emotional development in the stages of early childhood, understanding emotions is so important. During early childhood, children not only learn how to express their emotions themselves, but how others express their emotions too. Children learn and understand that in certain situations they may feel certain emotions, and others may feel emotions too and show them by their words, body language, and facial expressions. Likewise, many children quickly learn that if they act in a certain way, they can get an emotive response from the people around them, whether that is good or bad. They also learn at this stage that some emotions can affect physical behaviour and can even be used to influence or manipulate others around them. When children are between the ages of 2 to 4, their descriptive vocabulary increases. As they are able to describe emotions that they feel and see happening in their world, they are able to learn about the causes and consequences of these emotions. When moving into the age of 4 to 5, children have the increased ability to reflect on their emotions and those expressed by others, along with the ability to start to understand that it is important to manage their emotions in order to meet society's social constructs. So, moving on to regulating emotions. Regulating emotions is a skill that allows one to respond with a range of different emotions that are socially appropriate to many different situations. This is a tool that is ingrained into all of us as functioning human beings. However, as young children, this is a skill that must be learned and is an important part of development. Regulating emotions is a key aspect of social emotional development that is crucial in assisting children to understand emotions presented to them when interacting with peers. Regulating one's own emotions is difficult as a young child, as it requires them to recognize the stimuli that is entering their world and then identify the best way to emotionally respond to it. This response to show regulation of emotion may not be their first emotion felt, but one that they see as appropriate for the situation. For example, if grandpa plants a sloppy wet kiss on the child's cheek, instead of going, ew, that's gross, they would smile and greet their grandparents as this is what is socially acceptable in that situation. So, moral development in the stages of early childhood. Moral feelings in particular. So, when looking at moral feelings, there are both positive and negative aspects that make up this category. Morality is often associated with the negative feelings of guilt, anxiety, embarrassment, shame. However, on the other side of that is the complex positive emotions which children also need to learn in order for them to be a part of their moral compasses. This includes empathy, respect, pride, self-esteem, and admiration. Freud's psychoanalytic theory provides us with some critical analysis of the moral feelings in children and their process of development. Every child is born with an ID part of their brains, which purely operated the pleasure centers and demands where every impulse needs to be satisfied immediately. In his theory, it is only later that the ego and superego form. As the ego forms throughout infancy, it acts as a mediator for the impulsive desires and works out realistic ideas as to how to achieve the demands presented by the ID. This ego is not concerned with right or wrong, just as long as it achieves satisfaction without causing harm to itself or the ID part of the brain. This theory is possibly why Freud classified children as selfish and ego-driven creatures. So the superego is often developed during early childhood between the age of 3 to 5, and this is what controls the impulses previously felt. The conscious ego can punish the ego and ID through developing feelings of guilt and shame, and can in turn reward by presenting feelings of pride. This is where children really begin to develop a sense of right and wrong and build their moral feelings, behaviours, and reasoning. A part of moral feelings is identifying another individual's inner psychological states, or learning the ability to look at a situation from someone else's perspective. Once this is achieved, then the child can contemplate what actions may contribute to changing their psychological state, if it is a negative one, or improving it even more if it is a positive one. Moral development and moral reasoning. So, moral reasoning was really first intensely observed by Jean William Fritz Piaget. This psychologist, scientist, and biologist extensively monitored, interviewed, and tested children from the ages of 4 to 12. He was able to look at the way the age groups interacted with a game of marbles, how they strategized, applied the rules of the game, and their gradual learning through success and failure. He was able to further discuss with children their thoughts on lying, punishment, equality, justice, and other ethical issues. From these small but eye-opening tests, he was able to conclude that there are two stages of morality that the child goes through when developing between the ages of 4 to 12. Heteronomous is the stage that most affects early childhood, as it is primarily intact with children at the age of 4 and below. In this stage, children believe that the rules and justices that they have imposed around them are unchangeable facts of the world and cannot be controlled by people, but are just there in life that everyone must follow. Now, because young children are amongst this stage, there is no thought to the intentions behind someone's bad behaviour, only the severity of the consequences to judge if their behaviour is good or bad, and to what degree their bad behaviour may be. As a child grows, they move from the heteronomous stage to the autonomous stage, morality stage, where the ideas of right and wrong and their values change. This stage is in early adolescence, which would of course be touched on next week but occurs at around the age of 10 years old. This is the movement from the idea that rules are just in existence to the facts that rules are created by other people. Furthermore, they are able to put together an individual's intentions behind their actions, where once an inner child they could not. So continuing with moral development and moving into moral behaviours. Moral behaviours in children from the age of 2 to 5 are often based on observed behaviours which form a memory in which they can draw on for experience in future situations. This can have positive and negative effects on children's behaviour, as they are able to imitate whatever behaviour that they see, whether that be morally right or wrong. Furthermore, moral behaviours can come from the process of reinforcement, punishment, and then imitation. This is a tricky area for teachers and parents to combat, as often much of this needs to come from the home environment, where children spend the most continuous time period. At home, the idea of punishment can be implemented more consistently and with more intent than at school. In preschool settings, teachers will not always be able to follow through with the same systems of punishment as home, if even at all. Therefore, the moral behaviours learned in a school setting really need to come from the reinforcement of ideas and imitation or role modelling of these concepts to children. Moral behaviours are often closely linked to the resisting of temptation or the idea of self-control. This has a direct link to the cognitive development in children where they are able to physically delay the gratification process that occurs when giving in to temptation. This is a skill that even some adults cannot master, so embedding this ability in children is important as it paves the way for a strong minded and strong willed individual. Moving on to conscience. So, conscience is an internal regulator that almost all humans possess that allows an individual to determine whether something is right or wrong. This is developed as a child and continues to develop, change, and grow metaphorically as an individual is going throughout their lifespan development. This is made up of all three of the moral feelings, reasonings, and behaviours. Without this, children cannot actually clearly see or justify their actions and other people's actions as right or wrong because they don't have this type of control center to run the information they're getting through to come up with the correct answers. Often, this conscience is heavily influenced by parental feelings, views, and attitudes. However, if a child is not close to a parent but is close to a guardian and spends lots of time with another adult, their conscience may be driven by the views, feelings, and attitudes of that adult. In the textbook Lifespan Development 16th edition, it says that young children are moral apprentices striving to understand what is moral. This metaphor perfectly explains the little sponges that children are. They learn from the world around them and from the adults they have in their lives. Parental responsibility in teaching children morality and building their consciences, ability to make good choices and decisions is pivotal in moving through the spiritual stage of early childhood. The Australian Bureau of Statistics in 2016 reported that almost 70% of people in Australia have identified as religious, which often shapes one's spirituality and therefore shapes moral attitudes. In a household where children are closely surrounded by a religion and taught the culture, there is heavy spiritual development and conscience development going on with a rigid set of guidelines often to follow that can be laid out and is often developed from a book such as the Bible. Amongst the 30% of people that have no religious affiliations, there still needs to be a sense of spirituality that is instilled in the developing young children in order to give them the tools they need to grow as successful functioning people in society. Parents are able to teach children about their beliefs as people who have morals and values and instill these into children to provide children's conscience with the tools needed to get through daily life. Support networks. Support networks for children can come in a range of different ways, from people that many parents or guardians are aware of to those that many have never thought to take their children to. Obviously, family is a strong support network for the child to and immediate family to lean on for support, advice, and guidance. However, often families have to travel for work purposes or family connections may not be close for whatever reason. This poses an absence to their support network. In many cases, educators at the child's care centre, if they attend, can be a form of support network for children and families. These educators are often very knowledgeable on children development and needs. If the teacher has worked closely with your child, they will be able to offer ample support as well in relation to their stage of development and suggesting other support networks to turn to if need be. There are many other places for professional help where children and families can seek support for socio-emotional and spiritual concerns. Occupational therapists use activities to assist in boosting development of a child in certain areas. There are many types of occupational therapists that can assist in many different areas. However, talking to a childcare professional or general practitioner will assist parents in choosing the right one to move forward if support is needed in this area. Child psychologists seem like a scary place to go, however, really can assist in analysing the socio-emotional and spiritual development of children even from a very young age. They can offer an amplitude of clinical knowledge in how young children's brain works and how they are interacting with the world around them. General practitioners, and in particular children-specific general practitioners or paediatricians, are able to provide medical support for parents and children and give them other avenues of support to turn to, like occupational therapists and psychologists. Teacher standards in relation to socio-emotional and spiritual development. So, when looking at teachers' roles in developing a child's socio-emotional and spiritual development, there are many guidelines set out in the Early Years Learning Framework and throughout the national quality standards set by the governing body, ASEQA. These are things that teachers are expected to keep up to date with in relation to applying them to children's learning and development while in care. I felt this was important to touch on as many of you who are listening to this presentation will be moving into placements in the area in the near future and will be using this in your teaching careers. So here are just a few pictures of the National Quality Standard and certain areas that I felt important to highlight on the screen that you can have a look at. There's a few different standards and things that specifically relate to socio-emotional development in early childhood, and this is something that is used on a daily basis in an early childcare setting. So another slide that I thought was really important is the Belonging, Being and Becoming document, which is the Early Years Learning Framework. There's one called My Time, Our Place, which is for primary school age. That is often used as well. And there are specific areas here as well that you can see that directly relate to the socio-emotional development of early childhood. So these are outcomes that teachers have to meet on a daily basis. Not all of them every day, obviously, but they have to show that the child can meet all of these criteria by the end of the year, really, and that they've implemented activities and experiences to build the child's development in all of these key areas. So here you can see that children develop knowledgeable and confident self-identities. Children learn to interact in relation to others with care, empathy and respect. In outcome 2, children develop a sense of belonging to groups and communities and an understanding of the reciprocal rights and responsibilities necessary for active community participation. Children respond to diversity with respect. Children become aware of fairness. Outcome 3, children have a strong sense of well-being. Children become strong in their social and emotional well-being. So I just wanted to pull out and share a few points from the Early Years Learning Framework with you to really grasp an overarching concepts of teaching in early childhood setting in regards to social and emotional and spiritual health of children. So these quotes are actually in that document, however not in the outcomes, but in a section where it explains more about the purpose of the document. So, well-being is correlated with resilience, providing children with the capacity to cope with day-to-day stress and challenges, the readiness to persevere when faced with unfamiliar and challenging learning situations creates the opportunity for success and achievement. That's on page 30. This is also from page 30. Children's well-being can be affected by all their experiences within and outside of their early childhood settings. To support children's learning, it is essential that educators attend to children's well-being by providing warm, trusting relationships, predictable and safe environments, affirmation and respect for all aspects of their physical, emotional, social, cognitive, linguistic, creative and spiritual being. By acknowledging each child's cultural and social identity and responding sensitively to their emotional states, Educators build children's confidence, sense of well-being, and willingness to engage in learning. I just thought they were really awesome little paragraphs there from that document. And that is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Here are the references that I have used throughout. The in-text was all throughout as well. And have a great day.